Jake, I've got to ask, this was a quite unique script. What was your reaction the first time you read it?
Um, well, I really have only read a handful of scripts in my career that I had a response like I had to this one. Um, and you know, I was really I was left with a sort of vibration from it. You know, I was sort of shaken by the whole experience of reading it. I remember the first 10 pages on this sort of red-hewn, uh, um, you know, like confidential script page color, and something about the color of red, something about the subject matter and what was happening just started to really affect me. And I then continued to read. Obviously, you're planted at the beginning, and there's all this tension early on, and then it drags to the end in this way, and you're enraptured by this what's happening. You want to know. And I remember closing the last page and just being like, I can't even explain the feeling I had. A sort of similar feeling to the way people feel when they walk out of the movie now. I think as an actor, you lose the opportunity to see a movie that you're in once you decide or someone wants you to be in it. But you can always go back to that first time you read the screenplay. And if the audience's feeling matches that first time you read the screenplay, then I feel like you've done something successful. and that seems to be the response I've been getting from people. That same inexplicable thing that I can't really explain to you how I felt is the same thing that people feel when they leave the theater.
Yeah, it's unlike any experience I've had in the theater in a while.
Yeah.
You're playing a fictional character
Mm-hmm.
who's written another fictional character that Amy Adams interprets as your face. Do you play them? How do you play them differently?
I don't think they are different, these two characters. I mean, I've played dual characters in movies before, but this isn't really. I think one is an extension of the other. Edward is the author of the book that Tony, the other character I play, is the lead character in. So, and I think that Tony's experience in that book is a metaphor for the heartbreak that Edward went through when Susan divorced him and left him and broke his heart. And so he is really an extension. Tony's an extension of Edward and vice versa. So I never really looked at it like they were different. I mean, the only difference really is time. You know, when you meet Edward, he's very young, much younger than Tony in the book is. And the interesting thing I kind of had to come to terms with is that Tony in the book is really also an extension of Susan's idea of what Tony would look like, because we're watching Susan's interpretation of this book. So when I started to see how Tom was putting that together, as we talked about the character and what he was very insistent upon, I started to realize he was keeping me within Susan's perspective, which in a way was his perspective. So that sort of obsessive nature of Tom, as we know him, and his attention to detail, really was kind of staying true to Susan's vision, which in a weird way was kind of his vision, which ultimately allows for this interpretation of Edward's words and the way we see it in the movie, which I think is pretty brilliant.
One last question. You mentioned your career. You played in a lot of dark movies.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think you're attracted to those?
You know, it depends on what you consider dark. You know, I think, you know, Ang Lee said the other night, which I thought was pretty brilliant, that, you know, we pretend so we can get closer to the truth. You know, and that's my interest. I'm interested in what is true. I think there's great joy in mining dark spaces. You know, and I think ultimately you learn about yourself in a beautiful way. And so I don't think I'm attracted to darker things. I just think I find there to be more complexity in some of these stories, and more to mine, more to discover. It's nice to bring your own light to a dark place.